Hi friends, welcome to another episode of Why Jesus. On our show today, we have Ruby from New York. Hi Ruby, welcome to Why Jesus.
Thank you, Viji, for having me on your show.
Ruby, before we even move on with the show, can you tell us a little more about yourself, your family, what your interests are, what you're presently doing?
Sure. I live in Long Island, New York. I live with my parents. I have 3 younger sisters. I'm the eldest of 4 children. And I just came back from India, and because I was completing my degree in nursing in India.
Wow, so did you study all along in India, or this was just for your nursing degree?
I was actually born and brought up in New York, and I completed my 12th in New York, and it's after my 12th grade I did move to India to pursue my degree in nursing, and I was there for 5 years.
That's a major decision that you made to go to India. Usually kids want to stay here in the US to study. People from outside the US come to study in the US. What prompted you to go to study in India, Ruby?
I mean, it's a whole big, huge story that I have to say, because I really never wanted to pursue in nursing. My whole passion was to engage and do my degree in criminal justice and be part of the law enforcement field. And I would say it was my being part of a Malayali community, having Malayali parents. They weren't so for it, because establishing yourself in this law enforcement field is very difficult and might take time. So they wanted me to have like a stable degree, a stable job initially, and then I could pursue it in whatever I wanted. So that really did have an influence on me, and which after talking with them, it made more sense, have a stable career initially and then do whatever you want, so you have something else to back you up. So that's how I decided to take nursing. And then the next question is like, do you want to go to India or stay here, And I wasn't sure at first, and my parents kind of wanted me to go to India because they figured, being more closer to the culture. I only heard of stories or know about the culture, but really to have a first-hand experience, that's what they really wanted for me. And, at that age, being away from home, having a lot of freedom, being independent, it sounded like a pretty good deal. So I was like, all right, let's go to India. So I packed up one day and left for India.
Now, Ruby, you said that your parents played a major role in you choosing nursing as your profession. Now, do you think parents should have a say in the careers that their children choose?
To a point, yes. I mean, you should listen to everyone's opinions, especially your parents, because they did bring you up, and, they probably would know a lot more than you do, and, they always want the best for you. So, I mean, you should really listen to their opinions and then take a final stand on your own, because I don't think any student should be forced to go anywhere or forced to pursue in a career, because at the end I really don't think that would help you a lot. So I believe in listening to all opinions, gathering all the information and then deciding on yourself as to what you want to do.
That's a good point, to take everybody's viewpoint into consideration. Now, Ruby, you went out across the Atlantic to India. That was a major change. Can you describe your life out there and the challenges that you faced?
I mean, being born and brought up in America, and then moving to a whole different country, across the 7 seas, to a different country, it's definitely a culture shock, because, there's so many differences. Being in America, you're free to be who you want to be. You could go out, do whatever you want. But in India, as a woman especially, there are a lot of restrictions on you. Being, you have to be in home by a certain time. It's not safe to go out late at night, and it's not the norm of there, for women to be wandering on the streets at 9 o'clock at night, going to parties and things like that. And even just dressing up socially and culturally, you don't really think about a lot of these things when you're in America, because, you're really free to express yourself. But in India, the thing is, you have to dress up very traditionally and very conservative, because you're not supposed to expose yourself or expose any part of your body. You really have to, cover yourself and really think about what you're dressing. So that was one thing. And just socially, as a woman, like I said, you cannot be found at partying at 9 o'clock at night at a club somewhere, because that is not normal. And you did have to restrain yourself back from a lot of things, because you cannot be mingling with men or their opposite sex. I mean, you can, but there are limitations and restrictions on that. Otherwise, people will judge you or think otherwise. So that, and the climate, being in America, most of the year, it's cold. You only have 2 months of summer, but in India, it's summer throughout the year. I don't think they have winter in their dictionary. So it's really hot, humid, and, really hot. I mean, it takes a couple of months for your body to accommodate to the climate change. But yeah, there's a lot of changes in it, comparing American life to Indian life. It was a culture shock.
Ruby, apart from the culture shock, how was the academic part of it? Did you find the academic part of it to be different from the U.S. system of education?
Yeah, definitely, because in American system, like, education is very computerized, and you have the freedom to, research the topics and, roam around, all things like that. You have the whole complete freedom in your education. But in India, it's different because, not in a negative way, it does help you a lot in some certain aspects. You are kind of spoon-fed the information, and it was definitely not computerized, because you have to write 100, 200 page essays, and they were all manually handwritten. It was not, you were not typing them, you were not emailing your assignments. You had a deadline. You had to write out all manually with your hand, write down all these 200 page essays and hand it in on time. So that was really different. Yeah.
Definitely sounds more complicated than it just, feels. But now, how did you deal, Ruby, with all these challenges? Definitely, it's not just one challenge. You talked about several challenges, culture shock, academically, just the living situation, the environment. How did you deal with all these challenges?
You said it yourself, I had a lot of struggles. There was a lot of difficulty, just academically, the weather, being away from home, being in a different culture by yourself, and and especially dorming. That was a very unique experience, because you're living with 40, 50, 60 other people for the next 4 years, and everyone comes from a different culture or background. Everyone has different personalities. Just learning how to accept them, and accept them, being with them, being to live with them. You really had to, there was a lot to learn, because from coming from America, you did have different perspective on things, and they had different perspective, and it was definitely like a culture clash, I could say. But at the end, no matter where you go, I feel like you would find yourself with all these struggles, because in your life you will find yourself being involved with people of different personalities, and you have to learn how to deal with them all. So that was a difficulty being in the dorm. And I did have a lot of personal issues on top of all these struggles. So it was a lot of difficulties and struggle all together in the beginning. And what really did help me to get through all these struggles were, my faith in Jesus, and me praying, and my faith in Jesus. All of that really did help me to overcome this problem.
Now, you said that your prayers and your faith in Jesus really helped you overcome these tough situations. How did you start believing in Jesus? How did this whole relationship with Jesus or your Christian faith build up?
Well, my parents have been going to a ministry, a Christian ministry or a fellowship, as you could call it, and it's called IDCF, Interdenominational Christian Fellowship International. So my parents have been part of this ministry even before I was born. So I've always been born and brought up in this ministry. But as a child, you really don't understand a lot of things. These all become a ritualistic things. You don't really have the mental maturity to really understand a lot of things. But I think it was toward the end of my teenage years, my high school years, I really did understand who Jesus was. I actually had a faith in Jesus. But even though I never really had a personal experience or a personal story or a testimony that I really did have to witness. So I never had a personal touch. And it wasn't until I went to India that really changed my aspect and perspective on Jesus and my faith in Jesus. And it really did end up being a great experience for me.
Now, you said it was your experience when you went to India. Can you share that experience with us? That one thing that really grounded your faith and belief in Jesus, Ruby?
Sure. Like I explained before, I was struggling a lot. And, even though I come from an Indian culture, when you're there in India, people see you as a foreigner, like an outsider. And there was a lot of stereotypical, thoughts about you. They think you behave in a certain way, you are of a certain kind, and people do have a lot of opposition. You have to face a lot of opposition and struggles on that. And especially my professors, they weren't so, I guess, fond of me because, being a foreigner, and I did have a lot of hard times, I did have a lot of a hard time dealing with them. And I wouldn't say so much of my friends because they were understanding to a certain point, but it was really my professors that were giving me a hard time because I was a foreigner. And, being in school, I really had no clue as to what I was being taught. No, I was really, to be honest, clueless throughout the whole year. I really didn't understand what was being taught in school, and I was going through a lot of personal issues too at the time, and just at the same time. And, towards the end of my first year, I had to face my university exams and like a really bad foundation, a basic knowledge of all the subjects that I had. And I was so caught up in all my problems and my struggles, I never really focused on my academics. So towards the end of the year, I really thought going to that university hall, I was not going to pass anything. I would fail every single subject. So and with all the personal problems and the academic problems, it was just too much. And I'm not a person who breaks down really easily. Even for me, it was just way too much problems. And at the end, I was like, you know what? I'm quitting school. I'm going back to New York, and I'll pursue some other career back in New York. So it was really then I had no clue as to what I really should do. And I remember like being on the phone with my parents like once or twice a week and like crying on the phone, like saying I did not want to go forward. I just want to come back. And I was really like in a pit hole of disaster and doom. And I really had no hope in life. I just wasted my whole year in India, and going back to New York just seemed so senseless, and there was really no point. But staying here, it was just too much for me. So I was really in bad shape. That's when I went to Brother Dr. Mathews Vergis. He leads the ministry that I go to. And it was through his counseling and his prayers and his love and support. Also his wife, Miss Viji Varghese, it was through their prayer, their love and support that really did get me through the most hardest times of my life. And they were with me throughout the whole journey in India. So it was their prayers and my faith in Jesus that really did help me to overcome the struggles I was facing.
You are very brave from all that you tell me, Ruby. Ruby, you sound so steadfast in your faith and belief in Jesus, but had there been some point in your life, especially in your life out there in India, that you doubted Jesus or you've questioned him and wondered, is this all true? Is this all worth it? Is my faith worth believing in?
I never really had doubts in Jesus. I wouldn't say it's the right word to use, but as many youngsters I know, youngsters my age, always doubt. As a Christian, they always have doubts when they're faced with struggles. And yes, I never had doubts, but I did question as to why things were happening in my life. I really didn't understand why all this was happening in my life. So I had questions, but I would never say doubts. And even though I had questions, I really had strong faith that all of this is happening for a reason, and Jesus knows. And I know He wants me to go through this struggle and through this journey because He has something greater vision for me, and that's why this is all is happening. So I always had a very strong faith.
Ruby, have you ever been able to share about Jesus or your experience with Jesus to anyone else of your age group?
Yes, actually I had a very unique experience because, one of my closest friends, she was a Muslim. It's a surprise. She was not a Christian. She was a Muslim. And I think it was towards like our second year, she was going through really tough patches in her life. I mean, she secluded herself from everyone else. She was displaying very anger management problems. She was very irritated. She would not talk to anyone. She would rather sit alone, and she would cry for days and days. I mean, this just went on for months. And yeah, she was going through really tough patches. And for me to watch her go through all this, I just felt so helpless. But then, I took her to Brother Dr. Mathews Vergis, as we call him, Brother Uncle. And he did give her the support, and he prayed for her, and he gave her counseling. And we both talked about Jesus, and praying to Jesus, which I think really did help her, because when we went back to our dorm, we used to sit down together and pray together and read the Bible together. And she was very accepting of all of this, and really it did help her a lot, because I remember in her most desperate times, or like the worst, when she was having a really bad day, she would voluntarily come up to me and ask me to pray with her, or ask me for the Bible so she could, read the Word of God. You could really tell how passionate and how much she did really rely on God for all her troubles. And at the end, it really did work out for the best, because God had something vision for her. Something was much better, and her faith in Jesus really did help her to overcome all her problems. And it was really great, because it was so rewarding for me, my friend being a Muslim, and she's very supportive of my faith, and she started to believe in Jesus. So I was able to share my faith along with her. So I would say it was a great experience.
I'm sure it was a great experience to see that you made a difference in someone else's life, Ruby. Yeah. That's amazing. Now, Ruby, for a person who does not know Jesus, what would you say is the greatest character of Jesus that draws you to him? It's definitely his unconditional love, because he has so much love for you, and he cares for you so much. I mean, you think your parents will be there for you. I mean, your parents will be there for you through thick and thin, but there's always, a limitation, a restriction on that. They will not be there for you all the time. And from my personal experience, I was in India by myself. I did not have my parents or anyone to talk to. So it was really God who will be there for you from the beginning till the very end. And, he will help you overcome these problems. He has so much love for you. As a person, you have so much flaws and mistakes in your life, yet he doesn't care about any of that. He just loves you no matter what. He has so much mercy for you, and he forgives you for all the mistakes that you've done. And, he's very loving and caring. Now, Ruby, is there any part of your faith or your belief in Jesus that you are not very comfortable with or you dislike?
I don't really dislike any part of my Christian life, though a lot of youngsters my age, one probably negative aspect that they do find is, the social restrictions, like I said before. You can't be going to parties or drinking or having alcohol. You cannot have the worldly life. So a lot of people do see that as a negative aspect. But, as I look at it, my perspective is, once you find Jesus in your life and you have a personal experience with him, none of this, whatever the world has to offer, you don't really think about it, you don't care about it, because you find yourself being involved or being part of a greater plan, being involved in so many Christian activities, thinking about working for Jesus more. You don't really have the time to think about all this stuff, and your priorities change in life, and this Christian life really become part of your lifestyles.
Ruby, is there a person you draw inspiration from in your relationship with Jesus?
I find Brother Dr. Mathews Vergis, as I call Brother Uncle, I find him very inspiring because, he's so strong in his faith, and there were times in his life where the whole world shut down upon him. He still believed in Jesus even through the hardest times of his life. He really did have faith in Jesus that everything will work out for the best, and it did for him. So he has such a strong faith, and nothing could, break that faith in Jesus for him. Also, he has such a great zeal to work for Jesus, despite his physical ailments and, his age, nothing ever matters for him. He's always going on, what more and more can I do for Jesus? He never seems to be, just satisfied with all the things he has accomplished. He's thinking, okay, what more can I do? What else can I do? What more can I do? So that great passion to work for Jesus and to think about Jesus is really inspiring, which really has helped me, to be part more of Christian activities and outreach programs.
Now, Ruby, where do you see yourself in the future?
In the future, of course, I like to pursue in my career and go on. But despite my career and all that, spiritually, I would like to see me being more involved in more outreach programs, because I want to be able to share my experience with a lot of youngsters who are really struggling. So being part of the outreach program, you could really be a helping hand to someone, and which I have been part of a lot of outreach programs back when I was in India.
Can you tell us some of these outreach programs you were a part of?
There were so many, but I think a couple that I could think on top of my mind is there was a convention in India, and it's called Marathaman Convention. That was one outreach project that I was part of. I was also part of the Christmas distributing food kit project, share a meal project, different projects like End Scripture, sharing students. So I was all part of this different outreach programs.
Ruby, it is so inspiring to hear such involvement of youngsters such as yourself doing such noble needs, especially to those who are not fortunate to have their meals or have the opportunity to celebrate in big ways as some of us do here in the U.S. Now, Ruby, if you were given a chance to go back in time and change something in your past, is there anything that you would like to do differently or change?
I wouldn't change anything that happened in my past, because, I'm a person who believes, God lets things happen in your life, and these struggles happen in your life for a reason, because it makes you stronger as a person and it brings you more closer to God. If I have never gone through the struggles and had the problems I did have, I probably would not be sitting where I am right now. And it's those problems, to be honest, I treasure those problems, because those problems are what made me more closer to God. So I wouldn't really change anything that really did happen to me.
Now, if you were given a chance to change something in the world today, what would that one thing be?
I would definitely like to see more youngsters, really believing in Jesus and having a personal experience with Jesus, because I know youngsters, they rely on such temporary means of satisfaction, like, parties, friends, alcohol, drugs, you name it. They depend on all those things, for their problems or for, just satisfying themselves. But the real question is, do they really satisfy you? They're just temporary means. They only last for so long, at the end, these are just very self-destructive behaviors, and you find yourself at the end to be alone. You will not have any friends, and you will have a whole bag full of problems. So, and to be honest, and once you find Jesus, you really find purpose and meaning in your life. You have a reason to go on. You find such inner peace and joy that cannot be given by friends or parties and things like that. So
now, Ruby, what do you think you can do from your part to share that experience of Jesus to youngsters such as yourself?
I guess being part more of outreach programs, because these programs do help you, to be a helping hand and to reach out to more youngsters, through scripture sharing students and activities like that. Because, youngsters are really, it's the age where you have a lot of questions. You're trying to find yourself, who you are, and you have a lot of questions, and you don't have a lot of answers. It's like that struggling time in your life. So I really want to, reach out to students, and the way you could do that is being more involved in outreach programs. So you could really be a witness for Jesus and help them to have the same experience as you have.
Ruby, as we conclude today's show, what advice would you like to give the youngsters of today from all the experiences that you've had, especially of two different worlds, the Western culture and the Eastern culture? What would you like to tell the youngsters of today?
No matter what part of the world you're coming from, you as a youngster, you will go through a lot of struggles and a lot of problems in life. And relying on, temporary means, it really isn't the solution to all problems. When you find Jesus in your life, that is really, to be honest, the solution to all your problems, because he will help you to overcome these struggles, and he will be there for you from the beginning till the end. Even if your best friend or your parents can't be there for you, God will be there for you. And I dare you to really, let Jesus have a chance in your life.
Thank you so much, Ruby, for joining us on this show of Why Jesus. We and the entire crew of Word to World Television New York wish you the best of luck for all your future plans. And I really hope and pray that you are able to share Jesus to many more of your age group.
Thank you, Viji, for having me on the show.
Thank you, folks, for joining us on yet another episode of Why Jesus. Please stay tuned, same time, same place next week for another show with another young guest. Up until then, have a great week. Thank you.